Hey guys, OGalbina here, and welcome back to this week's episode of Draft League History, the series where we look at different Pokemon through the history of the draft format and see the roles and niches they fulfilled, as well as their overall value. This week we have a Pokemon with a very varied history in Zygarde. Today we'll figure out whether or not the Pokemon of Order could live up to the hype of its Dragon Ground typing that its predecessor Garchomp left for it. As weird as it is to think now, Zygarde wasn't half as much of a household name in the draft format during Generation 6 as it is now. At surface value, Zygarde seems like a great Pokemon. It has an insane 108 HP, 121 defense, and 95 SPDF, as well as a decent speed tier 95. It also has access to both Dragon Dance and Coil with solid edge quick coverage with extreme speed priority and good utility in a very spammable Glare for speed control. So why wasn't Zygarde typically drafted? Well, the answer is that there were simply better and more impressive options when it came to drafting a dragon and or ground type for your team, especially at Zygarde's price point. Dragons like Salamence and Haxorus served as better sweepers due to their much higher offenses and having reliable Dragon Stab, as Zygarde was really only able to click Outrage for Dragon Dance sets, which wasn't very easy to lock into, in a metagame full of the newly added Fairy type full of big threats like Fable and Sylveon. Even as more of a defensive dragon, it was outclassed by the much cheaper Druddigon, who also had access to Glare on top of Stealth Rocks and 3 great abilities and pretty solid coverage to boot. Its crippling ice weakness also stopped it functioning as a good bulky ground. While its great bulk allowed it to take a hidden power ice from most Pokemon if needed, if caught once with the move on the switch, it was essentially curtains, especially when you factor in its lack of reliable recovery. Zygarde being outclassed by other dragons wasn't exemplified by any Pokemon more than its Dragon Ground type brother in Garchomp, who was superior in pretty much every way despite having the same typing and same base stat total. Garchomp boasted a better speed tier at base 102, letting it outpace the many base 100 Pokemon. It had better coverage, a better ability in Rough Skin, and was a ground type with Stealth Rocks, which was another major downside to drafting Zygarde, as many teams rely on having their ground type set rocks. So despite having a decent amount of potential, Zygarde was often passed over for more reliable options in the dragon and or ground type role. Due to Zygarde being simply outclassed by so many other dragons and grounds, the usage of it throughout the generation, or even the ORAS metagame after the generation had ended, was very sparse. For example, it went completely undrafted in all DPL seasons thus far, even up until present day. Some of the very minimal usage we found on Zygarde in notable leagues was Aberforth using it in MPL Season 5, and on the Wi-Fi side of things, Shady Penguin drafted in GBA Season 5 and got use out of it in a few games. 1000 Arrows. This one move catapulted Zygarde from a mediocre, often overlooked Pokemon to arguably one of the best Pokemon in the format in Generation 7. 1000 Arrows was a base 90 power physical ground move that had 0 immunities. This move essentially attacked from above, meaning that even flying and levitating Pokemon who were previously immune were no longer safe. Now Pokemon that previously essentially walled Zygarde, like Rotom Wash and Skarmory, were now easily beaten by a plethora of sets. And even common resists that in theory could beat Zygarde now struggled with it, as it could just muscle past them. By virtue of 1000 Arrows being one of the most spammable and drawback-free moves in the game, Choice Band Zygarde became a very potent wall breaker, spamming 1000 Arrows until you made it do otherwise. The immediate boost of Choice Band helped make up for Zygarde's mediocre base 100 attack. It also had moves like Extreme Speed to pick up KOs on weakened threats, and even clean in the endgame if the opponent's team was sufficiently chipped. Dragon Dance sets were as good as ever, especially alongside Z-moves. The nuke was something that Zygarde really appreciated, especially when trying to push past fatter water and grass types that would have been able to check it much easier without the Z-Crystal tacked on. You would typically see things like Z-Outrage in order to push past fatter grasses and waters with a tiny bit of prior chip. 2 examples being Suicune, which max HP died guaranteed after Stealth Rocks, or Shaman, which needed just a little bit of chip to die to a +1 Adamant devastating Drake. It could also run Z Iron Tail to push past really annoying checks like Tapu Bulu and Unaware Clefable. The combination of 1000 Arrows plus a Z move made Zygarde a massive threat to sweep in a lot of games if it got up a Dragon Dance, though it could still run other items depending on the matchup. It could run a Yachi Berry to find more setup opportunities, Weakness Policy to abuse its great natural bulk and snag an extra boost, or even just leftovers to snag some passive recovery. Zygarde could also boost its already huge defense stat alongside its attack stat with Coil. Bulky SPDF sets found ample setup opportunities to sub up and even take advantage of checks to potential DD sets and start coiling up to win in the long term. For example, Zygarde can easily sub on more passive defensive pivots such as Ferrothorn and Mandibuzz. Mandibuzz being especially prevalent because defensive foul play variants could stop DD sets with ease. However, due to the defense boost that Coil gave, it could neither break sub with foul play or status Zygarde, making it easy setup fodder. While the first 3 moves on the set usually consisted of 1000 Arrows, Substitute, and Coil, there were a plethora of moves that could fit into the 4 slot. Extreme Speed was an option to make up for the fact that Zygarde wasn't boosting speed. Dragon Tail was another solid option for phasing around checks and forcing Hazard Chip on them as they tried to switch in consistently, Glare to slow things down, and the final option was actually Dragon Dance. 1000 Arrows was such a ridiculously easy move to spam that you realistically didn't even need another attacking move in a lot of matchups, especially when playing subpar grass types that didn't necessarily resist ground, such as Rose Raid, so having to play against both setup options at once could be terrifying for the opposing team if given ample time and opportunity to set up. Zygarde didn't always have to fit that setup sweeper or breaker role. It was also great in being a huge defensive nuisance with sub-toxic sets. As Zygarde was so scary on the setup side, its checks and switch-ins were often unprepared for the substitute toxic set. As noted before, Zygarde's sub was very difficult for some more passive monsters to break, so a sub-toxic protect set would often ruin more weak grass types that it was faster than. If, say, a Tango switched in on Zygarde clicking sub, it almost certainly lost the 1v1 every time and would be forced to either pivot out in order to regain health and reset toxic turns, or die breaking the subs. The last slot would almost exclusively be 1000 Arrows, as it was still a ridiculously spammable move and it beat the toxic immune steel and poison types. You would also sometimes see 1000 Waves, another signature move of Zygarde's that would trap the Pokemon that it hit, allowing Zygarde to toxic stall them to its fullest extent. Zygarde could also even run mixed sets, having a decent special attack set of base 81 with moves like Sludge Wave to hit unsuspecting grass types decently hard, such as Tapu Bulu or Whimsicott. Zygarde didn't only get 1000 Arrows as a signature move. Admittedly, none of them would even come close to the impact that 1000 Arrows had, but they were still nice in niche matchups, so I felt that they were still worth going over. 1000 Waves, as mentioned before, trapped the opponent in with Zygarde if hit with the move. This allowed Zygarde to trap and beat or set up on more passive pivots. Cornfurster was a base 100 special dragon type move that nullified the opponent's Pokemon's ability if that target moves first. This was great for Pokemon like Poison Heal Gliscor that actually checked Zygarde very well. And lastly was Land's Wrath, which admittedly was never used due to it having no benefit over Zygarde's other physical ground options. Zygarde also received 2 new forms and a new ability in Generation 7. The new ability was Power Construct, which turned Zygarde into its 100% form once it dropped below 50% HP. This made its HP stats skyrocket to a ridiculous base 216 while only losing out on 10 base speed. This Pokemon was obviously too strong for standard play and was banned, relegated to Uber's leagues, with Power Construct almost universally banned across all leagues. Zygarde also gained a smaller 10% form. This form lost a ton of bulk in exchange for a great base 115 speed stat. Losing out on its bulk definitely hurt, dropping it to a tier 3 Pokemon. But the base 115 speed tier was great in making banded sets terrifying, as well as Dragon Dance Z move sets if you could find an opportunity to get set up. When thinking checks and counters, grass types were typically the main roadblock to Zygarde. Examples being Tangro, Celebi, Shaman, Pokemon like that, being one of the only types that could consistently switch in the ever so present 1000 Arrows and threaten it out with either their stab, status, or more than likely hidden power ice, exploiting that nasty 4x weakness. Fatter Waters and Fairies also checked Zygarde very well, namely Pokemon like Unaware Clefable and Slowbro. Teammates wise, Zygarde really appreciated good ice resist as well as good fairy resist. Heatran in particular comes to mind as a great teammate, as it fills both those roles on top of breaking through said typings. It also made the opponent choose between hidden power ice and ground, which could be insanely valuable in some matchups. A solid water resist and breaker was also very much so appreciated, as Zygarde could struggle breaking through those. Some examples would be its usual roadblock in Tangrowth, Tapu Bulu, which also provided grassy terrain recovery that Zygarde really appreciated, and Serperior to scare every water in sight. There are obviously many other options, but those are just some that come to mind. Zygarde has been doing much of the same in Generation 8, with a few buffs and nerfs. Coverage-wise, it gained Skittish Smack to hit some frailer grasses, and Scale Shot as a physical Dragon Stab to boost speed and not force it to be locked into said move. Triple Axle being added really annoyed Substitute Zygarde, as if the move hit 3 times, it would not only break Zygarde's sub, but often KO it in the same turn. Zygarde really hated losing out on Z moves, making Dragon Dance a bit worse in a lot of matchups, being that it couldn't as easily push through its checks and counters. However, the removal of hidden power skyrocketed Zygarde's defensive utility, allowing it to hardwall electric types and sub down even easier on some of the more passive Pokemon, making the bulky coil sets or sub-toxic sets even more difficult to deal with than the generation prior. A new partner introduced in Generation 8 for Zygarde was the grass starter Rillaboom. It offered grassy terrain like Tapu Bulu, but had momentum in U-turn and priority in Grassy Glide. Melmetal was a solid fairy and ice resist that forced a lot of chip on bulky waters, as they were typically the main check to it, which Zygarde greatly appreciated. Dragapult could outspeed Zygarde and kill it through its substitute via Infiltrator, which is definitely less than ideal for our snake friend, though there weren't any great defensive stops introduced in the Generation 8 Pokedex, which Zygarde definitely appreciated. Zygarde is the Pokemon personification of rags to riches. It went from an incredibly mediocre mod in the generation it was introduced, with no discernible features to justify drafting it, to one of the absolute most meta-defining Pokemon in the format just one generation after. And it was all due to it getting just one move, 1,000 Arrows, showing that some Pokemon just need a small nudge in the right direction and they can achieve greatness. And also, the 1,000 Arrows is broken. Thank you guys so much for watching this week's episode of Draft League Study. Zygarde is one of my personal favorite Pokemon to use in the format, so I figured this would be an awesome one to cover. Also just due to the fact of its major glow up that it got between Generation 6 and 7. I thought it would be very, very interesting to cover. Let me know if you guys enjoyed the video in the comments below. Be sure to drop a like if you did enjoy. If you're new here, this is the first time you're catching one of the videos on our channel, be sure to sub. We have, these going up as much as humanly possible. I don't have a set schedule on when I want to do these, but I'm having a lot of fun making them, and I want to get them out to you as much as possible. But we also have other Draft League content, like actual Draft Leagues going up and things like that, and other types of discussion videos. So if that interests you, please consider subbing. I'd really appreciate it. Huge shout out to the entire team that really helped me out this week. I'm sure that my lovely editor, Kurt, will throw their names on screen. Shouts out to you guys. If any of you guys want to help with this series, please reach out to me either in the comments below or on Discord. Either works. I'll take any and all help that you guys want to offer me. I'm grateful for it all. And this has been a great series so far. Hopefully we can keep it going. Thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.